I read a decent amount, and most of the books I finish have some positive impact. But there are 3 books in particular which led to significant changes in how I approach both life and productivity. The 3 books are Atomic Habits, Deep Work, and Peak Performance. So in this video, I will go through some of my main takeaways, also which changes they led to in my life and how that impacted me. My name is Jarle, and here at Early Owl, we learn to change our lives for the better one day at a time. Okay, so I'll start with Atomic Habits. I was already quite deep into the habit rabbit hole, so it didn't completely change things for me as the 2 other books did, but it just helped solidify everything that I was doing. One of the important things that Atomic Habits helped me internalize further is that habits make things automatic. So if you have something you want to do that is hard but important to you, if you have to force yourself to do it every day, it's not going to work. But if you can just make it automatic, it's going to happen without you even thinking about it. And that is why habits are so important. Another part that stuck with me is that habits spiral. On one hand, a single day doesn't matter anything at all. But on the other hand, a single day means absolutely everything, because all we have at a time is a single day. I think one of the examples he uses in the book is eating pizza, where if you just eat pizza one time, one day, that's fine. But if you eat pizza one day and that day becomes every day, then obviously you're completely fucked. He highlights the importance of focusing on identity and processes over goals. One example of what it means to focus on identity is, instead of thinking that you want to get ripped, you should think that you want to become a person who is healthy. Whatever goal you have in mind will become a result of that. This is important both in terms of short-term motivation, because it helps you enjoy the process more, but also long-term results, where if you reach the goal, you suddenly might lose all motivation. Whereas if you've changed your identity, then whatever you were sticking to is going to keep going. After reading the book and learning to focus on the process, this has become a bit of an eye-opener for me. For several years, I was trying to make improvements on things like productivity and a lot of things where habits are important, but I never really find myself making much headway. And that was because I was only focused on the goal, not about the process at all. So what would happen is I would be highly motivated, and then I would have some specific goal to work towards, and I would work towards it for a little while, but then I would lose the motivation and I would fall off, and then I was back to square one. And the reason for that is because when I fell off and then decided to try again, I didn't make any changes to the process. I just kind of felt like, okay, now I have this goal and I really want it. Whereas the last time I didn't really want it. The moment when I started to see actual consistent improvements in my life was when I started to also be deliberate about changing my processes. I still have ups and downs and setbacks, but now when I have setbacks, I try different things and I make different changes. So I come back stronger pretty much every time. Another idea this helped internalize is that everything you do is a vote for the person you want to be. So that is why just doing the smallest thing towards a habit is so much better than completely skipping something. Because what you want to do with habits is to change who you are. You don't want to just get better at forcing yourself to do the thing. So every time you make a vote towards becoming someone who works out, for example, you take one step in the direction of becoming someone who just works out automatically. And even just putting on gym clothes and going outside is a vote in that direction, whereas completely skipping it is a vote in the other direction. The major change I made after reading Atomic Habits is that I started my habit tracking calendar and started posting it online. And this has become kind of the linchpin for keeping myself consistent and accountable. It also planted the seed of how to implement making bad habits more difficult, which is what led me to set up my system of different locks and mechanisms to keep myself from bad habits. And how these changes have impacted me, I think, is basically twofold. First one is that when things are going well, everything is really optimized and I make the most out of those periods. Sharing my habits online has also made me much better at keeping streaks alive. And when I do fall off, I tend to get back quicker, but this is still the area where I feel like I have the most to improve on. Peak Performance was the first book I read that really had a lasting change on my productivity. I actually had it recommended to me by my friend and colleague Sondre about 6 to 12 months before I actually read it. And if I remember correctly, he said something about how this book helped him appreciate the value of rest. And I was more at the beginning of this productivity voyage I'm on. And my thinking at that moment was more that I didn't want to rest, I wanted to be more productive. So I didn't read that book then, but when I was like 1 year into this journey and everything had fallen apart, like 6 months in and I hadn't recovered for like 4 months. I realized if I was going to get anywhere with anything, something had to change. The core message of this book is basically that stress plus rest equals growth. And I think the rest part of this equation, when trying to go for peak performance, is what we have a tendency to overlook. So if you're currently at a place where you're trying to get more out of yourself and you have the mindset that you're not looking to rest, you're looking to be more productive, but you also have a problem with staying consistent, or you have a problem with like crashing, then you have to read this book. The changes this book led to for me is, first of all, I started taking breaks throughout the day much more seriously. I used to never take deliberate breaks. Sure, I would like have lunch, or like sometimes I would have an errand to run, but I would never be like, okay, I'm going to take a 10-minute break now and go for a walk. It would just never happen. But after reading this book and realizing that breaks actually are beneficial, I started to put in a 10-minute break into every 1 hour of concentrated effort. This book also made me appreciate the importance of disconnecting in some of these breaks. So instead of just taking a break where you go from reading emails to reading Reddit, you want to take some breaks where you're not stimulated, where you're not listening to anything, you're not reading anything. You just let your mind digest what it's been working on. I think there's huge benefits in taking these breaks in what I'm able to do throughout the day, and also in terms of staying consistent generally. But another benefit I've had from them, before I started taking these breaks, I noticed a couple of things that would happen when I was on like a really high effort period. I would start to get a bit stressed when there was nothing going on. Like I was so used to being just going all the time that I felt like if that wasn't happening, then something was wrong or I was missing out on something. And taking these breaks where I deliberately don't do anything completely got rid of that feeling. In a similar vein, before I read this book, I also had a hard time enjoying or disconnecting in weekends, where I knew I shouldn't try to be productive 24/7, but I also didn't feel like doing anything less productive. So I would kind of just spend my weekends vegging out and waiting for the time to pass. Whereas after I started implementing some of these things from the book, I've become more deliberate about my rest, and I've been able to start spending more of my time doing things that are enjoyable and relaxing instead of just things that are passive. The book also made me start to appreciate the importance of purpose in what you're doing. I remember when I was reading this book on the plane, towards the end, it starts talking about purpose. And I took out my phone and started writing some guiding principles of what I'm trying to do and why. And while it's gone through some iterations, that is still the bedrock of what motivates me to keep going on everything I do. The final book I want to talk about is Deep Work. I feel like this book perfectly encapsulates how you can just take a really simple idea that is also really obvious, just phrasing it in the right way and putting it in the right framing makes all the difference. Even though it should have been obvious to me that focusing and concentrated effort is important, it still just made me internalize on a completely different level that almost all the important output I have, both in work and on the things I'm trying to do outside of work, is almost completely a result of any concentrated effort I have. And the quality of that concentration is the most important factor, even more than the amount of time I spend. And this is not only true when it comes to producing something or creating new ideas, but also when it comes to learning new things. For work, it really helped me become more aware of the fact that being busy is not the same as being productive. It's incredibly easy to just become overloaded and just jump between different tasks and feel like you're super busy and you're doing a lot and it's super productive. But in reality, you're doing very little that actually impacts anything. And that's not just because you're doing unimportant things, but it's also because your output becomes worse or slower when you're just jumping between different things. I definitely still have periods where I get overwhelmed and where I end up just jumping between tasks. But since I read this book and have now become aware of it, when that happens, I quite routinely catch myself being like, okay, wait, what has actually happened in the last 15 minutes? Have I just been jumping between tasks, like reading some email and then jumping to something else and reading that and then writing a little bit and being like, no, I should rather do the other thing? And I also noticed when I'm in this scatterbrained mode, when I try to focus on a specific task, it takes me significantly longer to just figure out what I need to do. Another thing this book helped me appreciate is that focus and concentration is a muscle, and it's something that you need to keep training to get better at it. And it's also something that gets weaker if you do the opposite and just give in to distractions. I find that this muscle analogy works for everything in life, whether it comes to mood or habits or concentration. Everything good you care about in life is probably something you can get better at through deliberate practice, or something that is going to weaken if you do the opposite of what you should be doing. The changes I made after reading Deep Work is that I got even more protective when it comes to notifications. I used to have my phone always on Do Not Disturb, but now I've just completely turned on all notifications, so I don't even see if I have any new messages. I just have to open them. Deep work also led to me implementing a deep work habit where in the morning, I will block off all distractions using cold turkey, and then I will set off a couple of hours where I just do deep concentrated effort before I allow any other distractions to move in. If you look at just my work, for example, doing the 2 hours at the start of my workday, even though it's just 2 hours out of a 8 to 9 hour workday, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that it doubles my productivity when I'm able to do it. Finally, I want to make the point that you should not feel like you have everything these books have to offer just by watching this video or another video about them. I made a video about this last week about why reading is important. So if you feel like you're struggling in any of these specific areas, then I absolutely recommend you read these books. That was the 3 books that have had the biggest influence on my life. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday.